to change subjects slightly,
Yeah,
you seem to be fairly knowledgeable about what's happening in Cuba, and it's been in the news a bit recently.
yeah.
What's your take on the protest? I think it's pretty likely to be an attempted color revolution.
Yeah, although those things don't really they don't gain a lot of ground in Cuba because
Okay.
there's a lot of reasons. One, well, let's start with the specifics. As you know, there was a vote this year, the annual vote on the lifting the embargo, denouncing the embargo, which is really a blockade, and
Right.
it was 186 to 2.
Right.
And of course, the two that voted against are United States and Israel. That's perennial.
Yeah.
But 186 voted in favor of denouncing the blockade.
Okay.
So that was June 15th. And you're familiar probably with a hashtag called SOS Cuba and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so they held this demonstration. A whopping 29 people showed up at the UN.
Okay.
And right after that, there was a Twitter storm. And that's the only way you can describe it. All of these people claiming they changed, and this is another thing. On Monday, the 12th of July, Bruno Rodriguez, who's the foreign minister, did a press conference, a very long presentation, and he took about a half hour of questions. And it's on Telesur, and I still think it's probably still up on their website. If not, you can check out the YouTube channel.
Okay.
So anyway, but what happened was there was this Twitter storm that started for a couple of weeks, and it was pretty obvious the tweets and retweets, like one Twitter handle was retweeting 5 times a second.
Yeah.
So there's obviously something wrong with that. It's a bot. I mean, there's
Right.
no human that can tweet 5 times a second, retweet. I mean, I'm not really that big on Twitter, but so what it appeared to be was that there was a series of bots, 60% of whom claimed they were actually in the country of Cuba, talking about under this hashtag SOS Cuba and SOS Matanzas.
Right.
So they get this Twitter storm going, and then on the morning of the 11th, of course, there's a few isolated demonstrations in a few places. And what happened was, as you know, and I put this up on one of the, I think on one Facebook post, and I said, well, Cuba's never actually called the police out on any demonstrations. And somebody posted this photograph of these riot police, which were clearly not Cuban. They were like Colombian or something, because they
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
riot gear. And it says it's in Havana. I said, that's not Havana. And the photo credit said Havana. I said, that is not Havana. And anyway, the other thing about the photo credit says it said after the demonstrations, these guys were walking through the streets. So, but they never called the police. What happened was there were people who were there were people who were armed. And, so the police went out and they arrested people like that. And that's one of the things that was going on. But they do, I mean, there is a police presence in Havana.
Yeah.
The Plaza de la Revolucion has an armed guard at the Jose Marti Monument, which is that pyramidal-shaped building.
Okay.
They have armed people. There is armed police. There are also armed citizens. Just so you know, my friend went to Cuba and she showed us a picture. It was a gun shop,
Okay.
and there was a sign in the gun shop that said, "In case of invasion, everything in the store is free."
Whoa, that's interesting. Yeah, just grab a gun. Yeah. So.
So anyway, so there's this Twitter storm, and these people come out on the street, and then what happens, of course, is the usual thing: is they show all these photos, and it happened a lot with Venezuela when even before Guaido, when that other guy, I can't even remember his name, Lorenzo. I always want to call him Lorenzo. Anyway, when he was running for president, same thing. They show all these pictures and they say, look at all these people demonstrating in Caracas. And then if you did a Google image search, the photo was of a Catholic rally from some years ago. A Catholic, it was like for the Stations at the Cross, like Easter or something like that. I don't remember what it was for. So anyway, so they start showing these photos, and of course, the president, and the tradition of Cuban presidents, when there's unrest, they go out and they talk to the people who are making a squawk. Fidel Castro used to do that all the time, and he would talk to people. And there was an incident, you may recall, in 2003, where somebody tried to hijack a boat, and it wasn't in sailing condition.
Okay.
And I think it was the first time since the 1960s that they actually executed a death penalty in Cuba.
Okay.
The guy, people died, and he put people in danger. Anyway, so people protested naturally, because if you ever met any Cubans, they are never happy. And not happy, let's say they're restless.
Yeah.
As you know, I drove for them. I drove a few of them around in 2018 during UN week,
Right.
and they hate traffic, and they were constantly, because is there a faster way to get to where we're going? Is there a faster way? And I'm like, I'm on Google Maps. There's no faster way. As long as you were moving, they were okay. They're very restless people.
Okay, that's interesting.
So there are constantly demonstrations. I wouldn't say constantly. There's a lot of demonstrating in Cuba, and the thing that they all usually agree on is that even though they may have complaints about the government or complaints about what things are doing, they all know that they have options. They have redress. They have recourse.
Right.
And except when people are doing illegal things like brandishing a gun in a public place, which is still illegal in Cuba. Some people may carry weapons, but you're not supposed to display them. But there are a lot of things. So the Cuban people are very restless. So of course Diaz-Canel called out for people to come out and hit the streets to counter demonstrate, and so that happened. What happened in the thousands versus in the hundreds? I mean, they were overwhelmed. They overwhelmed it, and those are the photos that went up as being these protests. So I don't know what's going on now a week later. But our friends were talking about there were legitimate complaints about food and medicine shortage.
Sure.
Cuba they have 5 prototype vaccines.
Okay.
Soberana 2, which is one of their big ones, that has a 93% efficacy. But they can't get syringes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of medical equipment they get in, and I've had friends that have gone on legal missions and medical missions to Cuba, i.e., people have gone to. They still do a lot of they do historical convocations about Cuban and world history. They have they're very internationalist.
Okay.
I've had a lot of friends go. I haven't been yet to Cuba, but one of my friends who went on a medical mission went to a psychiatric hospital, and because they cannot get a lot of psychiatric medications, they have pioneered some amazing physical therapy for people with diagnosed psychiatric conditions that would normally require medical medicine. So they a defensive necessity, and of course they're still a very poor country because during a special period they went from getting $1 million a day in Soviet aid to nothing. And they went to getting Soviet Union would buy every ounce of sugar that Cuba could sell, and they would give them oil, of course. And so what happened, of course, is during the time after the fall of the Soviet Union, you had a whole period of time where Cuba was, as a nation, in a complete crisis. And of course, in the true fashion, they shared the suffering, i.e., they went from Cubans were averaging 2,500 calories a day, and they went to 1,800 calories a day. And everyone from the government on down, at least that's the story Fidel Castro told, went to 1,800 calories a day. And they went from being able to harvest thousands and thousands of acres of anything to no gas in their tractors. So they did things like raise oxen, and they came up with solutions, social solutions. And that's sort of their kind of how they deal with everything. When COVID started hitting, they dealt with it socially as well. They did lockdowns, they did masks, they did testing, and it was Cuban doctors, the medical, they have the highest per capita doctor rate in the world, I think, at this point. They do the local clinics and stuff. Those medical professionals canvass the neighborhoods around to find out how people are doing, and they check on their health. They literally, it's a systematized house call, like in my organization, I go door to door and we canvass for people who might need the program. Like, do you need? It's the same kind of thing. Do you need medical care? Do you need legal assistance? So so there's a, so there's, because of the blockade, there's a lot of shortages. Food is a problem because, although I got to tell you that most of my friends I've gone there, they definitely, they did not starve when they went to Cuba, and they, a lot of meat. There's not a vegan diet going on there for sure. They very efficient.
Yeah.
Uh,
Interesting.
so there are a lot of there are protests, and you're permitted to protest, permitted to regress, but because of their parliamentary system is so fascinating. When I talk about a true democracy, you've no doubt heard of the Committees in Defense of the Revolution.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's part of there's sort of like it's like machine politics that works. It's sort of like, we had in New York, we had Tammany Hall, or the kind of machine that what's his name, Huey Long built, and only with the beneficiary being the people.
Yeah.
So anyone can run for office. There's no campaign financing whatsoever. It's arm's length, shake hands. So the Council of State Ministers is 640 members. 57% are women. Less than half are actually members of the Communist Party, which is also interesting because you don't have to be a member of the Communist Party to run for office.
Okay.
And the ballot boxes are symbolically guarded by school children.
Okay. Well.
So they have it's a very democratic system in that respect. And so the CDR is, and the other interesting study that came out from the Union of Cuban Jurists is that, which we've hosted here in New York. They're very interesting people, because the law, it's like with China having to deal with property law, like Cuba's having to deal with other kinds of law. So, but it's a very interesting. There's no state, like you don't have like a district attorney in Cuba.
Okay.
You have people that are like organized by the government to prosecute, and organized by the government to defend somebody in a court of law. It's interesting system. It's anyway, but one of the statistics that came out is Cuba also, you're not required to vote in Cuba, but 94% of the population goes to the ballot and votes every election. 94%. And so they have options, and they can always go to their CDRs, which are like Soviets in a lot of ways. You can go there, you can make your complaints, etc. So that is to say, making a long story even longer, we watched our friends at the UN mission give us these things, and there's a Cuban TV program that talks about the American policy toward Cuba, and they have all these, like you can go to the website of National Endowment for Democracy, and it'll tell you how much they spend on anti-Cuban government.
Right.
But they featured some people who were double agents. They're people who spied on Cuba for the Miami Mafia.
Okay.
But they turn the information over to they're like not moles. Yeah, moles. Anyway, so they featured one of these television shows. Featured, it was a demonstration. These people were complaining about something. I can't remember what it was about. So he says, he's talking to the camera. He says, "Watch this. I'm going to call up Univision, and I'm going to tell them I'm at this demonstration, and I'm going to tell them, they've got police here and they're busting us up and whatever. You watch." And of course, you're watching this demonstration, and there's no police anywhere to be found. Wide shot, no police. So the guy calls up. He's on his cell phone. He calls up, and they cut to the Univision thing where he's calling into this news show. And he's saying, "I'm here. We're at," I don't know where he was. They're probably in Matanzas or whatever. He says, "We're at this protest. The police have come." And one of the guys who actually, a group of them who were watching him saying this lie, started yelling at him, saying, "Why are you saying that? There's no police here. You're lying. Why are you lying?" And so, anyway, so it's a very responsive government.
Okay.
to its people's needs. So when you have things like this, you can always kind of suspect. But because of this Twitter storm, and because of this, because of course the emphasis that the United States government and the media puts on any dissent, it's got to be good. Any dissent, means, it's freedom of blow for freedom against, godless communism or whatever,
Yeah.
And when you have a country that the Carter Institute has never had to go to and observe their elections,
Yeah.
that, I mean, like I say, it's amazingly democratic system,
Okay.
and responsive system
Yeah.
to the needs of the people with the resources they have.
Right.
And of course,
Yeah.
if you want to talk blockade, if you anything like the company Bayer, which is a German company, but if you manufacture anything in the United States, they won't let you sell it in Cuba. That's
Okay.
part of the blockade.
Right.
Even if 10% of it is made in the United States. Somebody was pointing out, pointed to a copy.
Yeah.
And he said, if 10% of those parts are made in America, you cannot sell that copier in Cuba.
Right.
That's the blockade. So it's medicine, oftentimes food type things, although they do grow things there, and they do, they manage to feed their population. Nobody's starving yet, but the shortages, particularly because of the blockade, and they made the blockade, they used the example of COVID to really, really, as an opportunity, the U.S. government did to clamp down more on Cuba. And that was pretty clear. And, there's no change in policy from the last president to this president. Obama might have, through executive order, relaxed a lot of the regulations on like travel and trade, and opening up the embassy back again, and that was all undone by Trump, and none of that has been restored by Biden. And frankly, there's a dozen things he could do just by, if he was really serious about changing the legacy of Trump, could improve the situation between the United States and Cuba with just executive things that he could do legally as a U.S. president. And he's not doing any of them.
He's not
And
going
in fact, he's, no. And to say, and he gets up on the thing, and people like AOC, who are, I mean, speaking out of both sides of her mouth.
Oh, God, yeah. Her
Here's a
tweets,
woman,
weird tweets, yeah. Both sides of the,
Yeah, exactly. And then,
He
of course,
supported the coup in
too.
Venezuela, yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's interesting. Now, how?
Yeah. Well, it was. I'm sorry, you cut out.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'm here. Go ahead.
No, you were saying something. You're
Oh,
like
yeah,
asking
I
something.
was just saying, saying with the AOC, like she supported the coup in Venezuela. Like someone asked her how she felt. She said, I defer to party leadership. Well, party
Right.
leadership supported the
Right.
coup. Or with Bolivia, she retweeted something from Sanders condemning the coup, but then she had a picture of herself holding a Golpista flag, the coup flag. So she,
Oh my God.
yeah.
This is the political environment we're in.
Yeah.
Anyone who's in Congress. I remember there's a famous quote from Barb Boxer. I don't know how famous it is. She said it at a speaking engagement that one of my friends was at. She had just got the Senate. She said, everyone in the Senate is either an idiot, corrupt, a liar, or all three.
Right.
So
Makes sense.
it can be extended. And she's someone who had political aspirations, and that whole Justice Democrat thing. If you've ever seen that documentary, Knock Down the House,
I
it's
haven't
very
seen it.
interesting.
Right.
It was sort of like grassroots, and she was getting like advice from these old veteran civil rights folks who were with the Freedom Summer.
Right.
And the 1964, where Fannie Lou Hamer was shut out of the Atlantic City Democratic Convention.
Yeah, right.
A lot of these veterans of that. So she was getting some really grassroots advice, but the bank behind that was all, what's that? What's the Soros company called?
Open Societies Foundation.
Yeah. Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, so that's all. That's all. I mean, I hate to, I don't want to sound anti-Semitic, but it really is a lot of that. Like Bezos, Soros, they fund a lot of that. They
Right.
fund a lot of that stuff, and it's, I mean, it's an investment for them. It's peanuts in terms of their bank, because you give, $10 million to some whatever, or 20 million, and it's nothing. It's lunch money.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I would not be surprised. Anyway, so back to Cuba, the using the pandemic and using the shelter in place and all this stuff as a reason to maintain the Trump, the things that he's, that I can even, there's too numerous to mention. I mean, the guy was like sanctioned city. There's 130 countries the United States has sanctions against, over 1 billion people who are being sanctioned by the United States government.
Yeah.
So, and of course, the blockade has been around for over 60 years. And, like I said, Cuba's always been internationalist. They've always reached out whenever there's been crises, and they appreciate that. And of course, they've given as much as they've gotten, plus more. They've been doing medical missions since 1963. Do you, pop quiz, do you know where the first medical mission Cuba ever sent was? Give you a hint. The year.
The year?
Yeah, the 1963. What famous event besides the Cuban Missile Crisis? I
JFK
mean,
was assassinated.
no, but in the Algerian independence.
Oh yeah, yeah, okay, yeah, okay.
First mission was Algeria in 1963.
Yeah, okay.
That was even before they started sending,
Yeah,
military, like, to the Congo and,
right. They were the Congo. They put
Angola, so they're very internationalist. So
yeah,
they reach out, and after the embargo, they had this thing. Yeah,
right.
yeah, that was Che's first adventure, and it was an adventure in a lot of ways.
Yeah. First adventure in Congo didn't work out as well with
No,
Kabila.
no, it didn't.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Great
but
biography. Yeah, sorry. Great biography of Shea. John.
sorry, you cut out.
Yeah. Okay, can you hear me? Okay. Hello, still there?
Now I can, yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great biography of Shea John Anderson. I don't know. I think he's like a liberal or a social democrat, but he put a lot of research into that. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot in Chris Haney's book called not his book, but a book about Chris Haney called "A Life Too Short,"
Okay.
and he has all these stories about his training in Southern Africa,
Okay.
and they actually fought in some of the wars, like in Zimbabwe and Namibia and Zambia,
Right.
as part of their training. And he was trained in, of course, Chris Haney was trained in the Soviet Union also.
Right.
Anyway,
Right.
but yeah, that so they've been always, Cuba's been very international, and as you know, the first there, between there's Congo and obviously Angola, which was later, and Che's adventures in Bolivia, but also in 1966, they had this tricontinental conference of reaffirmation.
Right.
And the first people, their first thing they did, they introduced it, so everyone knew how serious this was. It was 3 dozen CIA operatives who had taken part in both the Bay of Pigs, not just the Bay of Pigs, but all the other sabotage efforts since the Bay of Pigs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
everyone knew who was behind all this. So it's kind of an interesting. So they haven't been shy of pointing the finger. And Bruno Rodriguez was very frank. He had a ton of data. It's I would definitely recommend looking that up. It's from the 12th of July. It was a press conference for Telesur. It was in Havana.
Okay.
Just lays everything out. He talks about the whole Twitter storm thing. He talks about the SOS Cuba, SOS Matanzas hashtags, and pretty much the intervention kind of, it's the typical U.S. playbook. Like you were saying, it's color revolution, only it's not going to get a lot of traction because what do they have to offer?
Man.
It's one thing if you have a place like Ukraine where you have this, I can't remember his name anymore. Yanukovych, right? The guy, he was
Yanukovych, yeah.
in financial trouble, and he
Right.
went to the EU, and they said do this, and he went to Russia, and they said no strings attached, and the EU said, well, you can't have us both, and
Yeah.
and so it's one thing to have a country that's already on the skids, and you got a legitimate grievance, but Cuba's not. Cuba, literally everything is a result of the blockade, homelessness. 85% of Havana residents own their own homes, which of course in a socialist nation doesn't mean you own it. It means you have it and you die. You can't pass it on.
Right.
It's not yours. So, so there's that. But it's not hard and it's the embargo is always, and the blockade's always been a losing strategy also, because you remember when Jesse Ventura was governor of Minnesota?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he led a Minnesota delegation down to try to, they had a trade show in the early 2000s.
Okay.
And President Bush said, no, you can't go. I said, yeah, hey, listen, I'm in a free country. I can go where I want. So he went and to try to, sell stuff to Cuba, sell food. And of course, Minnesota's got rice, and there's other products there. I don't know, but they're really famous for rice. And it was a food fair or something. It was like a trade show, but it was held in Havana. It was the early 2000s. So there's a lot of people, despite what the Miami crowd, the Gusano crowd would tell you, there's a lot more. I mean, it's all disinformation, but anyway, that they use. But there's a lot more people who understand and can see through the BS of the propaganda against Cuba.
Right.
And so I don't think it's going to get a lot of traction because this is a country that survived this huge wave of terrorist attacks, and just unbelievable. Have you seen the WASP Network, the film?
I haven't. No.
Oh, I highly recommend it. I don't think what happened was this French guy made this movie about five. We call them, in America, we call them the Cuban Five.
Right.
But the ones who were arrested in Miami for allegedly espionage. But the information they had was what they had turned over to the FBI, which is how they got outed. And the movie is really, according to the people I've talked to in the inside, is really accurate. And the guy who plays Rene Gonzalez, Edgar Ramirez, who, by the way, is an Esqualito, he is a pro-Guaido Venezuelan, played Rene Gonzalez, and said, Rene Gonzalez says, I never spoke to the guy before, but he really nailed me.
Right.
It's really good rendering of the kind of intelligence work that Cuba does to both protect its island, the homeland, but also to maintain and to counteract the web of lies that's spun daily, especially if you've ever been anywhere in Florida. I used to have a grandmother who lived in Florida, and it was unbearable, the amount of anti-Cuban government. At that time, it was Castro, so anti-Castro propaganda is stifling.
Right.
But there's a lot of people who didn't get influenced by that a lot, and some of them, like some of the people, like a lot of the Peter Pan Brigade people, weren't as inculcated in the anti-Cuba stuff.
Okay.
So like they moved to places like California and Tennessee and places, and they didn't develop that anti-Castro sentiment, I guess. But the South Florida people and the mid to South Florida people are terrible, and that's something that Bruno Rodriguez brought up in his press conference. That's a state that basically has won it for the Republicans whenever they've been elected. That was the state that swung for Bush in 2000.
Right. I remember that.
Yeah.
Pretty right-wing state. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of, it's a pretty, so it's important to get that vote for them. Like in New York, nobody gets elected mayor unless they get the vote of the Hasidim, which are they're the Orthodox Jewish community. There's over 1 million.
Right.
And there's several communities of Orthodox Judaism, Hasidim, including the Satmars, which my neighborhood is Lubavitchers, and they're actually, we used to go, some of their services, they would donate money, there was some mitzvah thing that they would do. But up in Williamsburg, you have the Satmars,
Right.
and you don't get voted without you don't get elected mayor without their vote.
Right.
But the Satmars, actually, they're interesting because you see them at all the pro-Palestinian rallies, because the
Yeah.
Satmars,
Yeah. I've noticed that.
right, they do not believe in a secular state of Israel.
Right. So
They
they're
also don't, yeah. So,
progressive.
uh, well, in a sense, it's more reactionary than progressive, but
Yeah,
it's
more for
reactionary.
religious reasons, reactionary religious reasons.
Exactly. It's a religious observance thing, because the state of Israel is not a secular state. It's a
Yeah.
it's in the hearts of its people, which is if you've read Hegel, and Hegel was talking about, are you kidding? You should not be anti-Semitic. The Jews are your best German citizens because they believe in a state that doesn't exist, so they're loyal to, so they work for Germany.
Right. Right. That's interesting.
So anyway, it's a very interesting community, and we used to have a lot of donors. Before I went on a vegan diet, we used to have donors in the Brooklyn Meat Market,
Okay.
Vineland Meat, and they were Hasidim, and they would donate every week. Anyway, but so Cuba, there was another actually interesting Cuba-New York connection. They might not know. There's a statue of Jose Marti in Central Park,
Okay.
and of course, every Cuban that visits wants to go see that statue. And the governor of New York commissioned a replica, and it was dedicated in the Plaza de la Revolucion. This was 2018, 2019. A replica statue of the Jose Marti statue that's in Central Park. So anyway, a couple of friends of mine got to go there for that.
Okay. It's interesting. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
You lived in New York for a time, I think. You lived in the
Yeah,
U.S.
about 27 years now. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. That's really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks. So, what do you think it would take for the U.S. to change its policy towards Cuba, if it ever does, minus a socialist revolution?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, part of it is I think, I think we're seeing a sort of a sea change in a little bit, because the Miami Cubans have a little bit less of an influence these days, but they're still being courted. Bob Menendez actually does fundraising in South Florida, because he's one of those Jersey Cuban descended people,
Okay.
just like not Torricelli, the other guy. Anyway, but yeah, but Bob Menendez is big, and a lot of these guys like Cruz and Rubio, these people are fringe people, but because they can be used,
Right.
they're still useful, and so they're still making money for this crowd. So at some point that's going to diminish, because you have now a generation of Cubans growing up who, of course, more than half of the country under 30 would prefer socialism anyway.
Okay.
But you have a lot of Cubans who are growing up that they grew up with that vitriol, but like most rebellious youth, they're asking questions.
Right.
And some are even traveling, because you can still, if you have family, you can still travel. That restriction hasn't been imposed yet.
Okay.
And
I guess Cuban people can visit the U.S. if they have relatives here.
Yeah,
Okay.
and vice versa. And of course, you can come diplomatically,
Right.
but a lot of times but it's really tricky. We hosted a guy who he was he's a German carpenter, member of the KPD, and could not go to school to study philosophy in Germany, of course, because he was on the trade track. He wanted to trade.
Okay.
So he went to University Havana and studied philosophy, and he met this kid named Jorge Jerez, and Jorge has cerebral palsy, but he's a journalist.
Okay.
And so we tried to get Jorge up here for a tour of this movie.
Right.
I think my wireless cut out.
Okay, yeah, it's okay. I can hear you crystal clear now. Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, you're cool. Okay, I got you back. Glad I got you
I
back.
might be using all my phone data, but
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Just we're yeah. So you were sharing a story about Jorge.
Yeah, Jorge Jerez. Yeah, he's a journalist, and at the time I never got to meet him, because the time when we were doing the showings here in New York, I'm on the wireless. It's okay.
All right. Okay. Cool. Okay. Sure.
Yeah. No.
I got you now. I got you there. Okay. Cool.
Okay. Anyway, but it was an interesting story because he had cerebral palsy from birth, and there was specialized attention for him, one-on-one attention all through grade school
Okay.
until he was able to be integrated into a regular classroom.
Right.
And he just finished high school and college normally, and got a degree in journalism in
Okay.
spite of being physically he had a, he's deaf, though he can walk on his own. And his speech pattern, he learned to speak, and he speaks clearly, and he can write. He's a tremendous asset to the Cuban Revolution, and his story is an incredible story. And he also did, Antonio Guerrero is one of the Cuban Five,
Right.
and he and his wife had no children, so he organized an island, countrywide campaign where they could adopt all the children of Cuba as their own children as a gesture of solidarity with Antonio Guerrero, which was pretty amazing. They kind of do that.
Cool story.
Social solutions to problems. That's the first place they look, is society, i.e. somebody gets sick, they canvass door to door, and so that's kind of, so anyway, but the Cuban to migration into the United States, it's the United States policy. So anyone who gets 1 foot on dry land can get asylum in Cuba, in the United States. But if you want to come through like what you'd normally do, which is go to a consulate, they don't allow it. So it's the United States boot on the neck, and then wondering why you're not getting up and walking around. It's because, okay, you've got a boot on my neck.
Right.
And that's basically the United States policy towards Cuba.
Right.
Government policy. And it's not, and the Cubans are always, so we want to make absolutely clear, we love Americans.
Yeah.
We do not, we think that your government is not in sync with you. We think that you're a little detached. The government is a little detached from you. They're being very nice about it.
Right. I see.
They used to talk about me. They talk about, Obama was very intelligent because he knew how to cater to both a constituency of progressive people who wanted fewer restrictions on Cuba travel, but at the same time, he won Florida.
Yeah, right, both at the same
you
time.
can't win Florida without the Gusanos and Espolitos,
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. That's interesting. Wow, cool. Okay, well, thank you for your time. Thank you for your time, spending your time.
having me.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to go. My dogs have to go out and pee here.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, is there anything else you'd
I
like
appreciate
to add?
you doing this for me, and I wish I had better bandwidth for you.
Yeah, maybe next time. Yeah, next time.
I think we said everything.
I'm sorry.
If you want, I can email, or I could send you a picture you could put instead of that little whatever.
Yeah, sure.
You want to put a picture instead of the avatar there?
Sure.
I'd be happy
to. Sure. I can do that. Yeah. So this will be more like a podcast than YouTube show. But yeah, sure. Like a pod. I'm converting my channel to a podcast, but I gotta figure out.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's really interesting. And is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, you're gonna have to do some serious editing.
Siri, that's okay. I'm used to it. I sometimes do a lot of editing with my videos. It's take a while, but hopefully I should have this up like in a couple of days, by this weekend anyway.
Okay, I'll look out for it.
It's fascinating. I'll have to take chunks out, but it was really fascinating, your stories.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for agreeing to be interviewed. Thank you, and take care.
Yeah, you too. All right, bye.
Bye bye.